Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here to speak today. I'm going to talk about how we can turn sustainability concerns into daily action in museums and across society. And so I'll talk mostly about the Sustainable Development Goals, which you might be familiar with from this picture here. And so the way I work is that I write these guides that you can get for free to help museums and their partners to get started with sustainable development. And I mean, my background was I worked in museums for a long time, and then I kind of discovered this whole other world that I thought this is really useful, but very few people seem to be aware of it. And it seems to me to make a lot of sense to draw on these existing approaches because they help us build partnerships and they help us make a good and effective use of resources. And I should say that the one in the top left, it will appear soon in a Hungarian language version, thanks to some funding support, hopefully in the next couple of months. But when we talk about sustainability or sustainable, what do we mean? Because you can put the word in front of pretty much anything, but it doesn't always make sense. The words can be overused to become almost meaningless. Sustainability or a sustainable state is supposed to be a kind of balance of considerations of people, the economy, and the natural environment. But we don't really have that at the moment. Sustainable development is something that's a bit different. It's the focused activity that helps us achieve that balance. So sustainable development is about action. It's an absolutely fantastic approach. And it helps us get away from that often slightly unhelpful discussion about what is sustainability or what is it not. It's also worth saying that in the old sense, sustainability was often about minimizing the damage that you do. Do no harm, it's called. Sustainable development is different. It's saying that we're trying to maximize, we're trying to provide this great, flourishing future where people and nature flourish together, not where we just try to stop doing any damage, because that seems to be a very low ambition. And so we can say, well, we live in a world with lots and lots of problems: intolerance, inequality, injustice, climate change, decline of biodiversity, lack of trust within countries, with governments, and between different countries. And this leads to conflict and ultimately to intolerance and to war, and just the erosion of peace is terrible. So we need to address this. We need to find the ways to help us get on track to a peaceful future. And so this is a quote from something called the Brundtland Report, which is very famous, from 1987. And it's the report that gives the definition of sustainable development that you see all over the place. But I thought I would pick another quote from it, that the integrated and interdependent nature of the new challenges, sustainable development challenges and issues, contrasts sharply with the nature of the institutions that exist today. These institutions tend to be independent, fragmented, and working to relatively narrow mandates with closed decision processes. The real world of interlocked economic and ecological systems will not change. The policies and institutions concerned must. So what does this mean? It means that the institutions that we have can't just be interested in a narrow set of things. They need to think about, well, how can they work with other sectors to create this peaceful future, to create different results? The institutions, if we think of them as kind of boxes, we need to look at changing the institutions themselves. And that doesn't just mean in terms of the bricks and mortar, it means in terms of their policies, their relationships, their visions, and what they are all about. And I'll give you an example. So this is from something called the Framework Convention for Climate Change from 1992. Has this aspect in it called action. We now call it Action for Climate Empowerment, with these 6 elements: education, training staff, public awareness, public participation, public access to information, and international cooperation to address climate change. Now that has been in the convention since 1992, so 30 years old next year. But for different reasons, it hasn't quite made its way into society. And we can say it's not made its way that far into museums. It has to some extent, but we can talk about that afterwards. And Rodney will talk about that. And we can also say that museums and other cultural and educational institutions are already recognized as important in supporting this by different governments at the different COPs, the climate change conferences. What we need to do is to get it to happen in the sector itself. And so this is where we come to with Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals as the latest program, let's put it that way, to try to break through this kind of deadlock where governments make the decisions, but sectors have to kind of work it out for themselves. The agenda and the goals are a kind of shortcut through lots of international agreements, conventions, and treaties, and they're all rolled up into this one program, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And if you're familiar with the goals, I'd really encourage you to have a read of Transforming Our World if you don't know that, because it's how the goals make sense. The goals don't make sense without reference to it. It's a fantastic document with a very inspirational vision. And so we can say that the agenda is grounded in existing human rights and international agreements, and it aims to help more people to gain their rights, both locally and everywhere. It applies everywhere. It pledges to leave no one behind, meaning that we can't just deal with the audience or the group of people we work with. We have to make special efforts to support those who are being underserved in society. The agenda is rooted in the principles of sustainability and sustainable development, about this balance of considerations. It emphasizes the importance of partnerships of all kinds, and it applies across all of society and to all of us, including in museums. And so the 17 goals is too many to remember. And so the easier way to think of it is to try to achieve this overall balance of these 5 things: people, planet, and prosperity, supported by peace and achieved through partnership. So the 17 goals are the kind of results framework, let's think of it that way, for these 5 things. We're always trying to achieve this balance with these 5 things. And to give some examples, so you might be familiar with the goals as they're presented here. It's important to say that they're not 17 separate challenges that we address on their own. Whenever we address one of them, we have to think, well, am I supporting the others, or how am I making sure that I'm not just solving one problem, but creating another problem somewhere else? We can't do that. And so it's important to recognize that the nice colorful picture that there is, which I also have on my wall, is only a shorthand version. So if we take one of the goals, Goal 4, Quality Education, that's just a really short title for the picture, for the icon. The full title is to ensure inclusive and equitable and quality education and to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. So it's obviously really relevant to the work of museums. And there's actually, if you were to explore this in detail, there's a lot in there. And then, but that is a huge challenge. That's a huge top level goal. Within each goal, they have their sub-goals. They're called targets. Within Goal 4, there are 10 targets that are actually much more practical. They're actually really easy to work with. That you might, for instance, pick a particular target, set yourself a goal, set yourself an endpoint, make some plans, and do the work. And that's how these things happen. And within Goal 4, there's one particularly important one, is Target 4.7, is to support education for sustainable development and global citizenship. Again, it has a longer title, which is an agenda for people to understand about human rights, gender equality, lifestyles in harmony with nature, and much more. It's an absolutely fantastic thing you can explore in more detail. And of course, it's to say that because the Sustainable Development Goals are used a lot, they're in lots of sectors, they're supported by lots of resources that we can just make use of very easily. And so I wrote this guide in 2019, Museums and the Sustainable Development Goals, which you can get for free, with this kind of framework of these 7 main ways that museums can contribute to sustainable development, I think. I mean, I worked in museums for a long time. It's just the model I use, but it seems to work pretty well. Around protecting and safeguarding cultural and natural heritage, supporting education, partnerships, making sure that your daily activities are supporting sustainable development, as are your partnerships and collaborations and so on. So that using the goals can help museums to plan and deliver meaningful activities, useful, relevant for the public. They address the challenges that we face in the world. They can help museums to put their unique resources to good use, but very importantly, to contribute to lots of different agendas at the same time, because the agendas are often connected with one another, and we can't just, as I say, solve one problem by creating another one somewhere else. So the goals can be really helpful to build partnerships and collaborations, particularly with other kinds of sectors, with other partners that are less familiar with what museums do. It saves you having to explain all about what museums can do, what they can't do, because you're just working to a common goal. The goal is the focus rather than what you can do. They help you demonstrate your value to society. And the shorthand way I have for thinking about this is that museums can help give the agenda and the goals to reach many millions of people deeply into society, but the agenda and the goals can help give museums purpose, and reach and purpose kind of make impact. They help us make a better and a bigger difference. And so we can use the goals and targets to understand both our positive and our negative impacts, and to make plans to manage both of these things. Sustainable development is about maximizing the good that you do, while you also reduce and ultimately eliminate the harm that you do. The goals and targets can help monitor, evaluate, and communicate our progress. And I think an important point to make is that the aim isn't just to describe how your work relates to the goals or lines up with them. It's to do things that help make them a reality, so that by 2030, these things are the reality. And in 2019, ICOM adopted this resolution on sustainability in Kyoto at the big conference, recognizing that all museums have a role to play in shaping and creating a sustainable future through their various programs, partnerships, and operations, and encouraging its members everywhere to use the Sustainable Development Goals and Targets as their kind of blueprint for this activity. And I just mentioned another publication I produced recently called Mainstreaming the Sustainable Development Goals. And I wrote this for galleries, libraries, archives, and museums to promote partnership, and because there's actually much more in common between them than there is that separates them. And I wrote this to try to get beyond this kind of problem of people just lining up what they do with the goals. And so the way that this works would be it expands on the 7 activities that are in the guide that I mentioned before, and it takes particular SDG targets and helps people to think about, well, what is the commitment that would underpin that target? What would the goal look like? What would you have to measure and be aware of? And how are you getting on with your plans? And you can use this to evaluate your current activity or what you want to do, and then to make plans to do it better. And so again, you can get that for free from my website. And just to say, there are lots of opportunities for museums and their partners to collaborate, to help society connect with these big picture challenges and agendas. So we have a new Glasgow programme on action for climate empowerment from COP26. These different initiatives around restoring the environment, supporting education for sustainable development, around healthy aging, and this Decade for Peace. And so these are just great opportunities for people for museums to connect what they do with what people experience in museums. So that's the end of my presentation. So thank you.